This title is narrated with virtual voice, computer-generated narration for audiobooks. Screenwriting Unchained by Emmanuel Oberg. Introduction. When I considered writing about screenwriting and story structure, I knew the first question I would be asked is why. It's not as if there weren't an abundance of books on the subject written by talented and insightful authors. In fact, most of us would agree that we need another book on screenwriting like we need a hole in the head. So why bring more noise to an already confusing arena? As much as I'd like to offer a concise, witty answer, I'm afraid this one needs a bit of background. Over the last 2 decades, as I was making my way through the film and TV industry, starting as a reader, then progressing to script consultant, senior development executive, co-writer selling a first project to Warner Brothers, and getting hired by Studio Canal or Gold Circle, then getting solo writing gigs with working title, Universal or quirkier outfits like Film 4, I had many opportunities to think about story structure and screenplay development from different perspectives. I gradually realized that a significant shift had come about towards the end of the 20th century. Some story theoreticians had drifted away from the classical dramatic 3-act structure and taken a logistical approach to it. I'll try here to give a brief overview of what I mean by this, but we'll spend a lot more time on it later. Let's first quickly define what I call the dramatic 3-act structure. We have 3 dramatic acts in a story if we have a main dramatic action. Someone is trying to do something about a problem, consciously or not. In that case, dramatic Act 1 is what happens before we understand this problem. Act 2 shows the attempts of a protagonist to solve the problem. Act 3 shows what happens once the problem is solved. Before, during, and after a main dramatic action. This is what defines 3 acts when a story uses the dramatic 3-act structure. There are no rules to dictate the duration of these 3 acts in pages or minutes, and this makes it a flexible tool. The dramatic 3-act structure is in fact much more complex and powerful than this. We can use it to structure a main evolution as well as a main action, and we can use it to design not only the whole story, but also its parts, dramatic acts, sequences, scenes, and even strands in a multi-stranded narrative. Again, more on this later. So what about the logistical 3-act structure? Well, more and more theoreticians decided to impose an arbitrary, rigid logistical shape on every story based on page numbers and not dramatic structural elements. Not only was every screenplay supposed to have 3 acts, these acts were also expected to have a fixed length and include mandatory plot points or beats at predetermined moments. This logistical separation between acts, determined by an arbitrary number of minutes or pages, and supposedly the same for every story, didn't match the more flexible boundaries of the dramatic 3-act structure still used as an underlying framework most of the time. Also, this logistical approach only applies to the story as a whole, not its parts. These theoreticians could state precisely what we had to do and when, but they had regrettably lost the connection with the why and how. For a while, this logistical approach was enthusiastically embraced because it gave a simple, reassuring map to follow on what is always a perilous journey, the writing of a screenplay. Creating something out of nothing is incredibly difficult, so of course writers, particularly newcomers, will take any help they can get, especially if it makes their task seem easier. Unfortunately, these artificial constraints, while not preventing talented writers from producing original screenplays, started to disconnect the way story structure was explained and discussed from the way it actually works, making it more difficult, not easier, for many to write original yet effective stories, which is in the end what everyone wants. All this because the logistical 3-act structure, as taught in many books, film schools and workshops around the world, had grown further and further away from the original dramatic 3-act structure. Feeling this disconnection between
Para seguir escuchando este audiolibro gratuitamente, haz clic en el enlace de la descripción y podrás escucharlo completo sin coste gracias a la prueba de 30 días de Audible.